Horror versus thriller. What's the main difference between the two similar but different genres? When it comes to movies, there's nothing like a good creepy horror that has you spilling popcorn at every jump scare. Then too, the suspense of a good thriller is hard to beat. The feelings of fear and suspense often overlap in both genres. So what are the main differences between horror and thriller movies? After countless hours wasted in dark theaters and hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt accumulated over the years, I've arrived at a rather simple, straightforward answer. As I ponder the differences between horror and thriller, I'm reminded of an old Gen X joke that is wholly inappropriate by today's standards. Not quoting directly, but it goes something like, "What's the difference between a bit asterisk asterisk and a hoe asterisk? They blanks everybody while never blanks everybody but you. It's all a matter of perspective." The same can be said about the main character, protagonist, in a horror versus a thriller. It's all about perspective. In a thriller, the protagonist is pursuing something amid desperate circumstances. In a horror, something is pursuing the protagonist amid dire circumstances. It's the difference of being the pursuer in a thriller versus being the pursuee in a horror. In a thriller, it's a desperate situation, but the protagonist could likely walk away without achieving the goal, albeit suffering great loss. Conversely, in a horror, it's a dire life or death situation where the main character can't just walk away, and often can't even run away fast enough. The only way to survive is for the protagonist to achieve their goal of survival. Of course, there are no set hard and fast rules regarding stories and movies. And for pseudo-rules, there will always be plenty of exceptions, especially in the production of art where creativity is at the core. Despite the exceptions, let's look at a few solid examples. Horror movies. In the movie A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, old Krusty Face himself pursues and murders people in their dreams in this 80s horror classic. It's both a dire situation, and the main characters are being pursued by a monstrous antagonist. In a more modern take on horror, Get Out, 2017, the main character is being pursued, but the pursuit begins subtly, then quickly escalates from a desperate situation to a dire quest for survival. In the classic movie, Night of the Living Dead, 1968, a film some credit as the inspiration for the whole zombie horror subgenre, the main characters are pursued by the living dead zombies in a dire, worldwide apocalyptic situation. Some horror films spill over into the action genre because of the elevated action sequences. The movie Alien, 1979, is often considered an immensely entertaining sci-fi/action flick. But at the end of the day, it's merely a monster movie set in space. Again, with a dire situation and the protagonist says being pursued by alien creatures, monsters. Thriller movies. In a movie like Taken, 2008, which arguably spawned its own subgenre, the main character puts himself in a life or death situation in order to pursue the one thing he wants to acquire above all else, his daughter's freedom. But what if Liam Neeson's character refused the kidnappers' demands and told them to keep his daughter because he could simply make another daughter and likely have a good time while doing it? Yes, it'd be an extremely short movie, but it'd be reasonable to assume the main character could go on living without much threat of being killed. Instead, the hero is so desperate to save his daughter, he won't let anything stand in his way in his pursuit to save her. In both Seven, 1995, and Silence of the Lambs, 1991, the main characters desperately pursue the monster, putting their lives at risk for some higher calling. But technically, they could just walk away and not risk their lives. Oftentimes, it is the higher calling that helps differentiate a thriller from a horror, and the higher calling motif lends itself to thrillers often being centered around law enforcement, justice, retribution, or revenge. Combining elements from both horror and thriller genres has created some of the most entertaining action movies of all time. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991, and Aliens, 1986, are not only two of the best action movies in history, but they are arguably two of the greatest sequels of all time, and not surprisingly both made by James Cameron. The original films in these series both leaned more toward a classic horror film structure, where the killer cyborg in Terminator, 1984, and the creature in Alien, 1979, represented classical monsters in relentless pursuit of the protagonists in each movie. In the aforementioned sequel movies, the main characters, Pursue Eyes, turned the tables and became the pursuers by going after the monsters while following a higher calling. Sigourney Weaver's character wanted to protect the orphan child, Newt, and the Terminator was driven to protect the young John Connor. Note to anyone creating a horror franchise, a James Cameron-inspired cheat code. In the sequel, shift the story away from straight horror and move it more toward the thriller side of things, where the main character is fueled by a higher calling and goes after the antagonist, essentially reversing their pursuer/pursuee relationship, as was the case in both hugely successful films, Aliens and Terminator 2. The next time you find yourself creating a story and you're not sure if your story fits in the horror or thriller genre, ask yourself, is there a monster, metaphorically or literally, chasing my main character? Or is my main character chasing the monster? Again, a metaphor for something that must be stopped. The answer to that question can help bring clarity to your story's narrative journey. Can you think of any exceptions to the horror versus thriller genre parameters listed above? Put it in the comments. In case you'd like to watch or rewatch some of these genre-defining films, links are in the description. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the stacks. Thanks for listening.